Welcome everyone. In this tutorial, I will teach you how to do this, how to create a wardrobe for metahumans and have one that is able to adapt to any changes on the metahuman physique likewise. So you see that as I change the height of this metahuman, we saw how the outfit actually adapted to him, and we could go to extremes like this and it will adapt. Now you saw there were a couple of issues in the back. That's on purpose. I will teach you what to do with all of this so it works. We are going to go up here to Metahuman Character and we are going to export combine skeletal mesh. Now this can be done with any metahuman, with any size, any structure that you want. You could even just go into the metahuman and reset the body parameters to what they were before. So you can use the base metahuman or you can use any of these as the preset. So it doesn't really matter what the type of the body is. You just need one body type that is going to be the one that we're going to use. So the first thing we need to do with that body type is drag it into the world, and I strongly recommend that we send it to 0 of the scene, because what we're going to be doing is sending our piece of clothing also to the 0 of the scene. And what we need to do right now and with any piece of clothing is actually match it with the metahuman. We can see that this one particularly is extremely big for this body of the metahuman. So again, it's going to depend on what type of metahuman body you're going to be using. So in this case, I'm going to reduce it by 10%. And I'm going to see if that fits a bit better. Generally speaking, it's fitted very well, but we still have some issues here or here. I highly recommend that we go into unlit mode, and that's going to give us a better view of what pieces of the metahuman are actually poking through. We see that we have some issues here because, as you saw on the original cloth, this is going to replicate on every single other metahuman. So we need to be very mindful and we need to make it so it fits almost perfectly. And thankfully in Unreal we do have the ability to do this, but with static meshes. So here's where it comes down to changing these skeletal mesh, because we're going to be using a skelly mesh, into a static mesh first, so we can get used to the modeling tools and we can use the modeling tools to modify this to better fit our metahumans. So what we'll do is, with the skelly mesh selected, we're going to go into actor up here and we're going to convert SKChess1 hunt to a static mesh. We're simply going to drop this into content to make our life easier. Some hunt chest is fine for the purposes of this. We're going to send it into the world, and what we'll do is send this one into the 0 of our scene. So I'll show you a couple of modeling tools that I tend to use, and then I'll just simply fit this the best I can into the metahuman so we can have it working for our presentation here. So now that we have this, and again, this is a static mesh, what we're going to be doing here is going into the deform tools and we're going to use vertex sculpting or dynamic sculpting. Now, dynamic sculpting, what it has is a sphere, which is great, but you need to make sure that remeshing is disabled, because otherwise, as we are moving this with remeshing enabled, it's going to start doing that and it's going to start destroying the geometry. So remeshing needs to be disabled. And what we need to start doing is exactly this. We need to, with the brush type in move, we need to start moving the geometry so it fits our metahuman. Now, the dynamic tool might be the solution here, or the vertex sculpt might also be the solution here. It's going to come down to what you think is going to be better for you and for your particular case. Again, this is not rocket science. It's not precise, so we need to be mindful. So the S and the D key are going to let us actually move the size of our brush. So we're going to make it bigger or smaller. Another recommendation I have for this is that you could change here in flat shading the color of the mesh. So that's going to make our life easier to notice the difference between the actual mesh and the geometry of the metahuman, which is great. So we pretty much cleaned everything here. I'll date a couple of things, but this is the process. Now you can export this static mesh and send it into Blender or anything else that you may want to do. So that way, when you modify it in Blender or in anything else, it's gonna be better, right? So what we're seeing here is that the application of our changes was made only in LOD 0. As we are vertex sculpting, we can tell the engine to create that into just LOD 0. We can't change that into anything else, but we're not gonna worry because we're gonna be switching off LOD 0 and we're gonna be moving into a skeletal mesh instantly. So the process right now is the following. We kind of need to bake the pivot point. The pivot point currently is incorrect, so Let's do X form, and we're going to bake transform first, just to make sure the scale is not changed, and we're going to bake it. That way it's going to change the scale to 1. And the next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that the pivot point is at the 0. We can't have the pivot point flying all over the place. So we're going to do world origin, and that is exactly why we sent everything into the 0, so that the mesh is now effectively at world origin. Remember, we can see all that peaking because, again, we are not on LOD 0, but that's going to get fixed here in a second. So if I would send the cloth into the somewhere else and then I reset it, it's going to come back to 0, right? Which is exactly what we want to do here. So let's do the following. We are going to find that chess piece, and what we'll do is right click on it, and we're going to convert it to skeletal mesh. Now we need to be very mindful here, and we need to, in creation type, set it to use existing skeletal mesh. And the skeletal mesh we're going to be using is exactly the one to which we actually fit the clothing. So that one in particular, I know it's called test, and it is test release combine mesh. And this is the skeletal mesh now. So if I were to drop this into the world and fit it to the metahuman, we see that it actually fits perfectly, and we lost the problem with the LODs. So what we need to do now is, as we open the skeletal mesh, we see that we used the metahuman skeletal mesh, but we don't have any weight painting. So we need to very quickly make sure that we have the weights correctly. So we're going to go for edit weights. And in transfer weights down here, again, this only works for Unreal Engine 5.5 or higher. Obviously, we are on 5.6 because we're creating Mr. Wardrobes. So we're going to select our test or whatever metahuman body combined we used, and we're simply going to click transfer weights. Once we do that, we're going to hit accept, and now we'll see that effectively all of that weight has been transferred and it works correctly. We're going to save this, and then we're going to finally get into the process of creating this as cloth. So as we are here, we need to create 3 assets, and the first one is going to be a cloth asset. So we're going to go here, cloth asset. And this is the great part. We don't need any of this. So we're going to delete all of this. That might seem completely overwhelming. Delete all of the assets. And we just need skeletal mesh import. And we're going to wire that into a chaos terminal. Cloth terminal. And there we go. That's all we need to do. Now in the skeletal mesh import, what we're going to do is find our chest hunt, which we're going to make our life easier and just select it from here. And then as we click here, we're going to use a little arrow to populate it. And we'll see it here in the world, which is perfect. You can see that it works. This is all we need to do here. We're going to save. We're going to go out, and we're going to create the second outfit, the second asset that we need, that is coincidentally called outfit. So we're going to go for outfit asset. And here, when this little window pops up, we need to make sure this is a resizable outfit. And in here, all of these nodes are perfectly fine, but we just need to, in the data flow variable overrides, turn them on and generate a new array option, a new array index. And then we'll troll these 2 down, and we are going to be dragging in here the asset that we just created, the cloth asset. And then down here, we are going to source body parts. We're going to bring the metahuman that we've always been using, which is the test metahuman combined mesh in my case, which is going to be a different metahuman combined mesh in your case. We're going to save this, and we're going to do our final approach. We're almost done, I promise. We're going to right click, and we're going to now find Metahuman Wardrobe item. Double click on the wardrobe, and in the principal asset of the wardrobe here, we are going to go for hunt. We don't use the cloth asset, we use the outfit. So we're going to do OA, chest hunt. And then down here in the pipeline, we need to make sure that we are setting this to a metahuman outfit pipeline. And within this new pipeline that opens up, we need to make sure that this is set to metahuman outfit editor pipeline. So let's go into our metahuman finally. Let's go all the way to the bottom where all our wardrobe is, and let's finally go ahead in content and drag our chest hunt wardrobe right here. Now this metahuman is already wearing this one, and now we just simply double click on the new one, and we got it. And now if I go to body and I change his height, for example, the mesh we created, the outfit we created, will adapt. And if I make him super tall, once again, the outfit will adapt. So this is how you can create a Metahuman garment in Unreal Engine 5.6 from a skeletal mesh. But this is it. And what I did back here was actually a bit more complex. What I did was extracting the chest piece, because this is fine. This is just a normal chest piece that's outside. That's a separate asset. But what happens if we find a super cool character in Fab? This guy is the Viking and is completely free in Fab. And we want something like this. We want the armor to be on our Metahuman. So what you need to do in this particular case is actually go into Mesh, and you need to change the mesh structure and extract the pieces that you want to do. Now, I have a video on how to extract pieces, so we won't be doing it now, but this was how to create Metahuman wardrobe garments for Unreal Engine 5.6.